World History on a Page by Jim Found, Part 1. Here's a way you can diagram the main dynasties and empires in world history to give you an overview of the past 4,000 years. I'm going to use a large piece of paper to make this diagram, but you can use an ordinary sized piece. First I fold it in half, and when I open it, here we have our timeline. Now I'll fold it in the other direction, and once and twice, and now when I open it up, each of these spaces represents 1,000 years. We'll start by drawing 1 AD here on the first crease, today often also called CE for Common Era. You go over to the next crease and you're already at 1000 AD, and then the end of the paper is 2000. In the opposite direction, we have 1000 BC here, and we go back to 2000 BC. We're going to start with the Roman Empire. We're going to draw all these empires as ribbons or bands across the paper. So right here, a little before the crease, because the Roman Empire started 27 years before 1 AD, and we will write Roman Empire here. The Roman Empire in the Europe part lasted almost to the year 500. In 476 it was taken over, destroyed by the invading Germanic tribes, but the eastern part of the Roman Empire continued for another 1,000 years, and just before 1500 it finally ended. During that time we call it the Byzantine Empire. Meanwhile, in the Middle Eastern part, Muhammad had introduced Islam to the Arab peoples, and they began expanding, and they took away the Middle East and African parts of the Roman Empire from them in the 600s. So this Byzantine Empire, as it continued, was not a large empire, just mostly Greece and Turkey. When we look down here at Europe, though, the Franks were the Germanic tribe that gained power in the part we now call France and Germany. You might remember Charlemagne, their famous king who ruled that entire area around 800 AD. In the 900s, a new entity was begun. The German half united with northern Italy to form something called the Holy Roman Empire. And that continued all the way until Napoleon ended it, just before 800. The ruling emperor at the time, a member of the Habsburg family, however, kept ruling part of it as the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and that continued right up to World War I. The Franks in the western half went on to become the Kingdom of France, which continues to this day. If we look at Britain, the Germanic tribes that took over Roman Britain were called the Angles and the Saxons. England is just another way to say Angle land. They were invaded in 1066 by some former Vikings coming over from France, getting rid of the Germanic line and starting a new line of kings. Right in the 1700s, they united with Scotland, and so that's when they began to be called Great Britain. And nowadays, the official name is United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what happened in the Middle East. After Muhammad died, 4 other of his associates ruled in his place, and finally a dynasty was formed called the Umayyad dynasty. Or this is called the Umayyad Caliphate, because Caliph means someone who's ruling in the stead of Muhammad. This lasted only around 100 years, and then a longer lasting caliphate came, the Abbasid Caliphate, which was ended by the Mongols in the 1200s. The Mongols, however, did not continue ruling the area. The rule of this entire area was taken over by the Ottoman Turks, and that continued also right up until World War I. They ruled the Middle East, Africa, and took over the Byzantine Empire. And finally, the Mongols also took over Russia. In that part of the Mongol Empire was called the Golden Horde. The Russians gradually got their independence and formed the Russian Empire, which also was ended by World War I. At that point, the communists took over it and formed the USSR, which then lasted until 1989. This is where we're going to end part 1, and my intention is that you would try to learn to do this by memory. You can practice on pieces of scrap paper, and when you feel you have it internalized, I welcome you to go on to part 2. Meanwhile, the details on how to draw this and the exact years, so you can take a guess at where to draw your lines, are on my website, foundbytes.com. Click on Learn History. Thanks, and see you at part 2.